I'm Amanda Jones, and I want to welcome you all to Tech Tuesday at 2 in the Edmon Low Creative Studios. Both the event and this space are designed to encourage students to experiment with some of the latest and greatest technologies and devices. We want to make these tools accessible to all OSU students and provide opportunities for students to develop proficiency and a comfort level with the kinds of technology that they will need to be successful at OSU and beyond. Tech Tuesday at 2 will meet here in the Edmon Low Creative Studios on the first Tuesday of every school month for interactive showcases of emerging and innovative technologies. Last semester, we had the opportunity to learn about GoPros, Adobe Premiere, and wearable tech. Today, we start our program with a hands-on workshop led by Christina Calhoun. She's the library's instructional designer. And then we're going to follow it by a question and answer session and a discussion by all of us. So if you're watching on today's live stream, you can submit questions as well using the hashtag LibTechTuesday on Twitter. So along the way, we will also be drawing for prizes, including today's grand prize, a 1 terabyte external hard drive. So be looking out for that. So if you're an OSU student, you can enter right over here in the back. Be sure to fill that out. So now I'm going to turn it over to Christina for today's program.
Welcome to Tech Tuesday. Thank you, Amanda. I hope you guys are all doing okay today. We're going to dive in to InDesign, and you all have your computers in front of you. Go ahead and on your Start menu, you can click there and then click under All Programs. You'll see that it says Adobe InDesign CC 2014. Go ahead and open that. And while it opens for each of us, I'll tell you a little bit about the uses of InDesign. InDesign is a page layout design software that helps you design many, many different types of page layouts. It could be for advertising, it could be for marketing, it could even be for a class presentation or a poster that you're making. It's used by a lot of people in the creative industry, such as magazine designers, such as newspapers, and even to create ebooks. So, it's still opening, okay. The first thing we're going to do before we jump into designing something, we're going to design a very, very simple ad for people who want to visit Florida. May or may not be the greatest place ever, because that's where I'm from, but we can talk about that later. Once this comes up, feel free to click Done if that comes up on your screen. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to change some preferences. Adobe InDesign 2014, their measurements are their default measurement, that's the word, is in something called picas, which is an industry term. But we're going to change it to inches because it's something that most people are familiar with. You can change it to something else if you'd like. If you go up to Edit on your screen, and down at the very bottom, there's an arrow, keeps going down. Go ahead and click Preferences. And we're going to click on something called Units and Increments. Can everyone hear me okay in the back? Okay, awesome. Once we click on that, you'll see something under here where it says spread right beneath that. There's the horizontal and vertical. We want to change that from picas to inches. If you see something there that you like better, that speaks to you better, feel free to use that. I'm going to be conducting it in inches, so go ahead and change both of those to inches. Once you do that, feel free to click OK. How are we doing? Thumbs up if you got that. All right, awesome, thank you. We're going to go to File, and we're going to start our new document. Now, you'll notice there's a few different options here. You see Document, Book, Folio, Library. You'll notice you can create a book. If you want to actually create a book with pages and a certain design to it, you can select that. Library is if you have a Creative Cloud login, you can create a library of different items that you can share with others using the Creative Cloud. But today we're just going to concern ourselves with documents. So click New Document. It gives you a default here. If you have a preset document that you use all the time, let's say you always do things in landscape view with 6 pages facing each other, then you can actually save that as a custom one by clicking here and going Custom and then saving it. But we're just going to use our default today. There's several different intents that you can start a new document for. We're today going to do print because we're going to make a print ad, but you could also choose web which it doesn't just mean I'm creating a website page. It could be anything that you're publishing on the web. There's also digital publishing. Let's say you know you want to create something just for an iPhone or just for a specific tablet. You would choose that option, and it actually gives you a preset option for the iPhone 4 or iPhone 6S. You can choose all different types of things. But we just need print today. That's just to give you a little background in case you want to play around with this further. Number of pages we'll leave at 1. We only need 1. We want to start on page 1. Now, facing pages. Let's uncheck that. Facing pages is kind of like a book if you wanted to see one side of a page to the other. And we only have one page we're working on, so we definitely don't need that. While I'm thinking of it, let's click this box down here below for preview, and that lets us preview what it is that we're about to set up. Oh, and while I'm looking back here, you'll notice behind me that this screen, about every minute or so, it'll slide to a new example. These are examples of items that you can create in InDesign that have been created using InDesign. Okay, so back to our settings here. You can choose the page size. We're going to leave it at letter, but if you scroll down, there's a whole bunch of different ones. Orientation, obviously, portrait or landscape. We're going to leave it here at portrait. And a nice thing about this program and with all Adobe programs, if you hover over an option, it'll tell you immediately what it is that you want to do. We're going to leave columns at 1. Margins, something nice about that is this box right here, if it's checked, you can change one margin and they'll all move together. We want to leave it at 0.5. Bleed and slug, that has to do with, the bleed is to making sure that all content goes to the edge of the page, and slug has to do with if you're sending notes to the editor or the publisher about how to publish it specifically, you would put notes in the slug, but we don't need that today, so if you wanted to in the future, you could play with that. But for now, all of our settings look great. Let's click OK. So we have a lovely blank document, beautiful clean slate here we can do anything with. One of the things you want to get into a good habit with, as with anything that you're creating using a computer, because technology is very, very, very fickle, is saving. So we're going to save right away, even though it's a blank document, we're going to save our document. There's actually a folder that's been placed on your desktop already. I believe it's called Tech Tuesday. Let me see. Yes, Tech Tuesday InDesign. And we're going to save it into that folder. It's on your desktop. So we can navigate there. And we're going to call it Florida_ad. If you want to get creative with that, feel free. You can change it to whatever you want, but it's pretty descriptive. The file extension for InDesign is .indd. So if you save this in that folder, you'll see it with that extension. If you create a book, it's INDB. So we're going to go ahead and save. How are we doing so far? Thumbs up, we're good? Okay, excellent. Now we've got that saved. Let's look a little bit about the setup of InDesign. One of the nice things about all of the Adobe Creative Cloud products is that they're all kind of similar in the way that they're set up. They all kind of speak the same language. If you go to Photoshop or if you go to Illustrator, you'll notice similarities between all of the different programs. So that is something good that helps with the learning curve as you're changing from one program to another or learning a different one. It helps that they're all set up similarly. They kind of all just speak a different dialect, so to speak. Across the top here, we have something called the control panel. And we're going to use a bunch of different features from the control panel, but right now, we'll just call it the control panel. Here on the left side, you have tools. You can actually click the top and move it around if you want, but we're going to leave it there. Or if you want to click this little drop down, you can move it around and, oops, or you can do that. How do I get it back? Where did it go? Just give me 1 second while I figure that out. And while I'm figuring that out, I can tell you about, on the right side here, we have something called our workspace. This workspace, you can actually change up to be different things. Right now it's set on Essentials. This is our workspace switcher. But let's say you wanted to work on typography. You'll notice it gives you a whole different set of options now of specific things, specific panels here that you can use to work with what's on your screen. If you wanted to do digital publishing, printing and proofing. Today we're going to just use advanced, so if you want to go ahead and switch yours to advanced, even though it says advanced, it's actually not advanced, I don't think. It has a lot of things that you would use regularly when creating just a single document. And my tools are back, yay. You'll notice on your tools here, this tools panel on the left, some of them have a little arrow on the bottom right. If you hold down your left key over it, it actually brings up more tools. So that little arrow signals to you, hey, I'm not just the only tool here, there's more underneath me. All right, now that you know a little bit about that, oh, and to mention also, this is the tab documents up here. If you have multiple open, you would have another file right here, and you can actually go between each of the documents. So that's helpful if you're working on multiple projects at once to be able to go between them. All right, a good design rule of thumb before you begin any project is to have a layout that you follow. And one of the good things about InDesign is that it gives you the option to create guides on your page, so that way you can follow them as you design your project. Sometimes people use, you can separate the page into thirds or fourths, sixths. It doesn't even have to be symmetrical. There's a lot of different layouts that you can follow. But today we're going to create one, and we're going to separate it into 3s and 2s, I believe. But we're going to go to, if you go to Layout, and then Create Guides, we're going to create a guide for us to follow. Let's do 3 rows and 2 columns. And let's click this preview button again so we can see exactly what it is we're coming up with. You'll notice that there's this space in between each of the layout bars here. That's just called the gutter. You can actually increase the gutter to make that space wider. It's kind of like dead space in between, or you can make it smaller. It's up to you. We're just going to leave it the same. You can also fit it to the page, so ignoring the margins, or fit it to your margins. We're going to fit it to the margins now because we want to keep it within that. If you want to fit it to the page, also fine. We'll click OK. One good thing to note is that while you're designing, if let's say you don't want to look at this layout, you just want to see what you have on the page, you can hit W, and that will remove everything and give you kind of like a print preview of what it is. Or you can also get rid of the guides alone by hitting Control:, and if you hit it again, they'll come back.
Control what?
Colon. Yes, and feel free, if you guys have questions at all, please feel free to raise your hand. If you've fallen behind, we have some people kind of floating throughout, and they're available to assist you during this time. Okay, so let's say you want to put text and you want to put graphics in here because it's an advertisement. It'd be pretty boring if you were going to look at a white piece of paper for your advertisement. So we want to put some text and we want to put some graphics in here. With InDesign, every time you want to add in text or graphics, you're going to add in something called a frame. They're all built in using frames. So we're going to start by adding a text frame to add some text in. And if you go over to your Tools menu on the left, there is a T there. It's called the Type tool. Go ahead and select that. And now we've activated the Type tool. If you go on your document, you'll notice that it now has kind of like a little box with a cursor in it. And that lets you know, hey, ready to create some text frames here. There's a couple ways you can create a text frame. And, oops, my bad. I accidentally turned off my guides, but I'll fix that right away. There's a couple ways that you can create a text frame, and one of them is by clicking. We're going to do it right up here in the top left corner, and then just dragging to whatever size you want it to be. I've made mine that big. You can make yours a little smaller if you want. Let's go ahead and enter a header. Since it's about Florida, visiting Florida, we'll write Visit Florida, exclamation point, because we're excited about it. We want people to go visit. You'll notice it's really tiny right now, but we'll fix that in just a moment. We're going to get to our font settings in just a minute. Let's hit 2 enters there to go to 2 lines. And we have a header, and we know we want to put some text below it, but we haven't written it yet. We don't know what we want it to say. We haven't come up with the perfect words to describe the beauty that is Florida. So we just want to put in some placeholder text right now so we can get an idea of what it'll look like, but not necessarily our actual text. And the way that you do that is you're going to go to, we have our entered here, and we're going to go up here to Type while it's still in that frame, and we're going to go to Insert or Fill with Placeholder Text at the very bottom. And once you do that, it fills it with a bunch of Latin gobbledygook that nobody really understands, but that's not the point. It's just to give you an idea of what it looks like. And there's a whole lot of it there. So we just added in some placeholder text. So before we format that, let's say we want to add in, we know we want a text box at the bottom too. And we see that our Type tool is still highlighted based on the little cursor there. So let's go in the bottom here, and we're just going to create a box here in the bottom right. But this time, we've already come up with some text. We've already written just a little blurb. We know that this is our little catchy blurb that we want to put in the bottom. And so the nice thing about InDesign is that you can actually import text that you've written in a Word document elsewhere. It'll hold on to all the style that you put on it originally, the formatting. And you can import that. You can import RTF, rich text formatted files, Word document files, just to name a few. So while we have that cursor still highlighted there, we are going to go to, up here to File, and then there's something down here that says Place. Now, remember I mentioned to you that we have that folder that's on our desktop, and inside of that, let me navigate to it, our InDesign folder. Oh, I'm already on it. The Tech Tuesday InDesign. We're going to open that, and you'll notice that I already have a file in there called Florida_text. And if yours, mine's not showing the file extension, but on yours, if it is, it would say .rtf, a rich text formatted file. And we just want to place that file into there. So go ahead and select that and open it. And it should, on your screen, insert the text that was on your desktop. If you are having any issues, whatnot, feel free to grab Bonnie. She's floating around. Just either raise your hand or, okay, excellent. All right, so our Florida text here, it doesn't really, I wanted to match up with our margins. It doesn't really do that. So if you click Escape, you'll notice it now highlights the box. If it doesn't, for whatever reason, you can always go up here to this selection tool, this little arrow here, and that's how you select items to start working with them. So I'm going to make it a little smaller because I know this is the font that I want to keep. It's, if I click back into it, I believe it's Georgia 15 point. I want to keep it that. So I made my box a little smaller just to be aesthetically pleasing. You'll notice it's within my layout grids. And let's now say we want to do some edits to the font that's up there, up here, because now it's really little. We want to make it a header. We want to make it bigger. Let's go ahead. We're going to click our type tool again, because anytime you want to edit text, you click your type tool. Let's highlight visit. We want to see if we can change the word visit to something we like, and if so, we'll change the whole thing to it. In your control panel up here, you'll notice once you highlight that, you have a bunch of options for what to do with your font. Right here, up here, this is your font menu. And I'm going to choose something different. Mine's going to be Magneto because I like it and I've already chosen it out in advance. But if you see something that you like, feel free to choose that. And that's super tiny, so we need to also make it bigger. So the font size box is right here to the right of that. And I'm going to go ahead and make mine 60 because this is a header. It's really big. It should be visible from miles away. Not necessarily, but it should be visible. And then we're also going to change the color. Right now it's just black text, but let's say we want to make it a blue because Florida has big blue skies. So right over here, you'll notice on the control panel that there is a T, and if you hover over it, it says Fill. Once you click that drop-down menu, you'll notice that this is what's called a color swatch. It gives you some preset colors to go into this file. We are going to choose our blue here, but once you choose it, you'll notice at the top that there's an option for tint. We can make it a little bit lighter, we can make it dark. Well, we can't make it dark, as dark as it'll go. But I'm going to make my tint a little bit lighter, and we're going to go 54%. And we'll push this back up there. Oops. So we've got 54% there, our tint in the blue. You'll also notice on your right side in your workspace that there's something also called swatches there. You could also change the color on that side as well, but right now we're just going to stick with the control panel. Right beneath that is something called stroke. And this is similar to putting a border on an object like you would in Microsoft Word or PowerPoint. And if we click below that, let's say we want to make it have a black border, a black outline, or a stroke is what it's called. So click that. Now let's look at it. I personally like it. I think it looks great. And I think I'm going to go with that for my header. So there's an option here called the eyedropper tool. If you go to the bottom left of your tools there, you'll notice that it looks like a little dropper, like a medicine dropper or eyedropper. If you click that, this works the same way as if you're using Microsoft Word or PowerPoint or one of those programs, the formatting paintbrush, where you can highlight something, hit the paintbrush, and then go over some other text, and it'll copy that exact formatting. So if you go over this text that you want to copy that formatting, just click once over it, and your little dropper turns to the other side, and it's now filled with that formatting. And we're going to just highlight Florida. There we go. And obviously my words are too big, so I'm going to go over to my selection tool, make my box a little bit. I'm going to select this and make it a little bigger, pull it over more. How are we doing out there? We're following along? Excellent. Okay. Any questions thus far? Great. Okay. So we're going to go through, I'll show you some more things that we can do with the font here. This text here, right beneath it, let's say I'm going to click my type tool again. Let's say we want to make it the same font as what we have down below here. It's always a good design rule of thumb to not have a million different fonts. 2 or 3 is a good rule of thumb. So let's say that we want to change this, and we know below it's Georgia. So let's go ahead and highlight this text, and we're going to make it, oops, my bad. We're going to make it all, I'm having a rough time with my mouse pad. Hopefully you're having better luck with your mouse than I am. Okay, there we go. We're going to make it up here using our font menu. We're going to change it to Georgia. All right, and let's say I want to make it a little bigger so people can see it. I'll choose 14. This number that's right here below the font size is called the leading. And the leading is basically the space between lines, how far apart the lines are. So if you select that, we want to make it a little bit wider between each of the lines, and I'm going to select 18. Just give it a little more space. Also, you'll notice to the left of the leading is something called the font style menu. And this is where you would change it to a bold or italicized text, or changing it to bold italics. You would use the font style menu for that. So I'm just going to make mine italic. I'm going to do a little cleaning up because I noticed that it's all separated here and I want it all in one box. And all right. Excellent. So we have our blurb here. There's some extra text. This little red plus box here tells us that there's extra text below that that won't fit into the box size. It's okay. It's just our placeholder text, so we can leave it for now. But in the future, if you want, you can click that and it'll actually give you the option to place that text elsewhere if it's too long. Okay, so we've got some text. We've got our text down. What can we do with it? The basics of what we can do with that. Let's bring in a graphic now. Same way we brought in our text, we're going to use a frame for that. But the frame that we're going to use to bring in a graphic is going to be just a little bit different. If you go over to your Tools menu, you notice right there in the middle, there's a rectangle with an X in the middle. And that's called your Rectangle Frame tool. This is the tool that you'll use the most to bring in graphics or illustrations, anything from another program that you want to bring in graphically. And if you hold it down, it's got that little arrow there. You'll notice that it also has a few different shapes, which there's the rectangle, there's an ellipse, and a polygon. Right now we just need the rectangle, so let's go ahead and click that. Just like the type tool, there's a couple ways we can insert a graphic. So we could click and drag like we did with our type tool, but this time if you just click once while that tool is selected, it gives you the option of entering your own specific dimensions. I know that a specific size of pictures that you would see in real life is 5 by 3.5. So I'm just going to enter 5 by 3.5 and click OK. And you can make that any other size that you want. And it comes up with a rectangle frame that you're going to import a graphic into. How are we doing with our rectangle frames? Are we feeling good about them so far? Yes? Okay. If you want, you can use your selection tool, highlight that, and move your box into the middle. You'll notice as you move it around, if you get to a point where it's centered, you'll see a snap to guide. There's a purple line in the middle of mine that once I hit the center, it kind of shows up to let me know, hey, you're in the center. And then if you move it up and down, likewise, it'll tell you where you are centered. So I use those just now so that I am right smack dab in the middle of my page with my image, or my rectangle frame. So in order to put an image in there, we're going to do just like what we did with our text tool. We're going to go to File, and we're going to choose Place so that we can place a graphic within our frame. We're going to use that same folder, And there's already a picture that's been preloaded in there. I knew I wanted to use it. And we're going to choose the beach picture that's there. So once you see it, you'll notice that it's a Photoshop file, .psd, if you can see the extensions on your end. And one of the good things about InDesign is that you can import all different programs, files into it. It doesn't have to be converted to a JPEG or a PNG or anything like that. You can actually import the Photoshop file or an Illustrator file or whatever program, Adobe program you might have been working in. So that's one of the really neat things about it, about InDesign. You can also, there's an option to edit that file within it, and it will open it up in its own program. But that's something you can look more into on another day. So let's click that, and we're going to open our beach picture. And once you do that, yours might look a little crazy. Mine looks a little crazy. It's super large and pixelated. And there are some different ways that we can actually fix the frame size, or the image size within the frame. If you go up to the top here on your control panel, if you hover over these options here on the right, you'll notice that they all have to do with the content fitting into the frame. You can play around with a couple of them. That one made it all nice and pretty. It's now filling the frame proportionally, so proportionally to the frame. Fit content proportionally, so you can make it so that the content itself fits to the frame. And then there's just a few different ones. That one stretches it out that you can just play with here and see which one you like the best. I'm going to go with our first option, which was fill frame proportionally, but whichever one you like the best, feel free to use that. You'll notice that you have the option, you can make your frame larger, but the image doesn't go with it. We got some questions up here whenever you guys get a chance. Or do you have a question? You can go ahead and ask.
Well, it's not I clicked one of them and the picture just took over the whole page.
Oh, that's fun. We'll have Bonnie come take a look. Maybe she can give you a hand. Okay. Okay. So you can make the frame larger or smaller. I'm going to hit Control Z and undo what I did there. Because you notice that the actual size of the graphic doesn't change with it. If you grab this little circle in the middle, you can move the image around within the frame. Do Control Z again. Or you'll notice that once you grab it, there's a brown box that now comes up, and that's how you change the size of the image. Again, I'm going to make mine just back to normal size using Control Z, or you can do Edit Undo. One thing that is really helpful that I like to use a lot is this autofill box. If you check that, you can now change the size of the frame and the picture will go with it. So let's say you want to make it bigger, but you were worried that it was going to make the picture look weird. This changes them together. And a really good thing to always remember is if you hit Shift, hold down Shift while you drag, that'll actually constrain the proportions, so you don't have to worry about the width being a weird size and not matching up with the height and whatnot. I like the size of my image. I'm going to leave it the same. If you want to make yours larger, feel free. You'll also notice that in the corner here, if you go to the corner with your selection tool, it becomes a little arrow that has an arrows on both sides, and you can use that to rotate the image. So if you do that where it's highlighted now, it's got little arrows. I want to rotate mine to the left a little, give it a little pizzazz so it's not just flat right there. And now I want to move it down so it's between my two text boxes. Feel free to play around with yours however you want it to look. So we have our image here. Now you may have noticed right below that rectangle frame tool with an X in it, there's another one that looks just like it, but doesn't have an X in it, and that's the rectangle tool. And the rectangle tool isn't so much used as a frame to bring in objects, but more so as just a simple shape. If you want to create different items in there with shapes, you can use it to create backgrounds, small logos. This is more used as what you see is what you get with that. So if we click on it, you also notice if you hold it down, you have the ellipse tool or the polygon tool, but we're just going to use the rectangle. Yeah. What's that? Oh, Bonnie's got you. All right, so let's highlight our rectangle tool, and we're going to create a background because this ad is starting to look really lovely, but it's kind of, it's a little boring. We could add some more pizzazz to it. So a way you would create a background is just by simply, you can either, click like we did before and enter your dimensions for the page, or you can just go to the corner here. If you want to start at the left, you want to start at the right, and just drag over the whole page. And now you've created a rectangle. If you notice that around here, that's where your selection is. You might not be able to see it because it's a clear box right now. But if let's go back to our selection tool so we can work with it. If you notice in your workspace on the right here, you have an option called Layers. Let's select Layers there. And when it comes up, it's probably not going to be pulled down yet, but there's a little arrow here. Click that. And you can see that the layer that we just added was that rectangle. One nice thing is if you want to label your layers, you could click on it once and you can change it. Like this is my background. So now I remember that that's my background layer. But what InDesign does, like many other Adobe products, is it brings it in layers. So the first thing that you add, you'll see at the bottom here, goes at the bottom. And that's kind of like the lowest on the totem pole. The last thing that you added will be at the top. And that's kind of like having it in the front or at the foreground. So you notice our background, this little blue box tells us it's highlighted. And we want to add some color to our background. Remember I told you before that what we can do up here with color, we can also do in our workspace to the right. So let's go ahead and click on Swatches. And that pulls up our color swatches that we can make our background here. So let's say I really liked my blue that I made before. Whoa, but that's really dark and it's also in the front. So we'll move it to the back in a moment. But let's say, let's go up here to Layers. If you click on Layers again, all you have to do is hold down on that background, click and hold down, and then drag it to the bottom, and now it's in the back. Now, for me, that's a lot of blue. If you like that, great. If you want to make yours yellow or purple or whatever color you want to make it, awesome. But I want to create a gradient background. And so if we go over here to our swatches, we want to create something called a new gradient background, which we're going to add to our swatches here so we can use it for anything else that we want. And in our swatches panel, right at the very corner there, you notice that there's a drop-down menu. Click that. And you can create a new color swatch, you can do something called a new tint swatch, but what we're going to do right now is a gradient swatch. I mentioned the new color swatch because you'll notice that there's only like maybe 6 or 7 colors that are within, that are given to you. And if you want to change what colors you have there or add to them, let's say you're working with a specific color palette, you can add them by doing new color swatch. But we're going to add a new gradient right now. So once you pull it up, it gives you some different options. You can actually label it if you want. You can call it something like my favorite gradient or whatever you want to label it. You may have used gradients before in Microsoft Word or in PowerPoint, and it gives you an option of linear, which is up and down or side to side, or radial, which is more circular. And I'm going to choose radial because I want my background to be coming out from the center. At the bottom here, you see it gives you this preset of black to white. And so if you click one of these gradient stops at the bottom, it now activates your ability to change the color of those gradient stops. There are several different options up here. You'll notice that there's 2 specific ones, CMYK and RGB. If you're doing a print ad, CMYK are the colors you'll want to use. If you're doing something online, you'll use RGB. Just the reason is because they show up differently, the colors show up differently whether you have print or online. So since we're using print, we're going to use our CMYK. You can also, if you wanted to use your existing swatches, you could select that. But I'm just going to use CMYK and I'm going to make some colors that I think are pretty. Feel free to do the same for yours. So I've got a light blue here on this side. I'm going to click my other gradient stop and, oh, it comes up on swatches. I'm going to go back to CMYK. And I think I'm going to make it a similar blue. I'm going to do a similar blue on both ends. This side I'll make a little bit lighter. And then if you click down at the bottom, you can add in another gradient stop. So those gradient stops just tell you here's where the bursts of color will be. These diamonds at the top, you can move them around and that'll adjust the fade between the colors. So I'm going to make this one in the middle. I'm going to make it white so that way it kind of fades from white in the middle to blue on the ends. I think that will look really nice. And I'll make it just a little bit darker so you can tell. Feel free to adjust yours whatever colors you guys decide. If you want blue, if you want purple, however you want, whatever your heart desires. Now if you click add, that now adds it to the background and you can kind of see what it'll look like. And you'll also notice that it added it to the swatches panel on the right side here. So I'm done. If you want to add another color, you could keep going and start new, but I'm just going to go ahead and click done because I now have my background. I'll give you guys a second to work on your backgrounds, get them set up. Now, while you're doing that, you may have noticed that we bring items in. So we brought in our graphic from some other program. It wasn't something that we copied and pasted. We didn't create it within here. We brought it in from another program. And you'll also notice on our graphic here that there's this little paperclip looking thing at the top of it. That's because it's a linked item. And also if you go to your workspace here, you can click on the links panel and it'll show you what items are linked. Linked artwork is connected to the document but kept separate, which is why we have that folder that has all of our items in it, and which is why it's really important to keep all of your items saved in one folder. Linked items are actually just a representation of the original file. So if you were to go edit that Photoshop image right there, that beach image in Photoshop, and save it back to the file, as soon as you open InDesign, it would ask you if you want to update to the most recent changes, because it recognizes that. The reason why we do that is because it actually saves a lot of space within it. If you're linking it, it's not, like I said, it's showing that representation and it's kept in the folder, and it makes the file size much, 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 much smaller. One inconvenience of that is if you, let's say you want to bring this to your friend's computer and show them what you've made, then you have to transfer the whole file with it. Otherwise, it won't recognize, if you don't bring over all of the things you've imported in that file, if you don't bring the file with you, it won't recognize that those items are there. It'll just say that they're missing. So that's why we save things to the file. Now, if you embed it, which means you might create the image within the file itself, or you can copy it from another location and paste it in there, that's called embedding. It's now part of the document, it lives with it, it's built into it. Like I said, the downside of that is that it creates a really large file size. So embedding is ideal if you have maybe a very small logo or perhaps a small black and white illustration, something that's a very small file size. You can embed that in there. So I always recommend that you link your documents, which is creating that frame and bringing it in from wherever you have it saved and keeping it in that folder. All right. We'll just do a couple more things to jazz this up a little bit so you have some tools in your toolkit for when you're starting your work in InDesign. We're not going to obviously get to the whole program today. There's a lot. This is a very powerful tool. There's a lot that it can do. And you also, one good thing about being an OSU student is that you have access to lynda.com logins. Lynda.com is a tutorial site that helps you learn different programs, different design techniques. You can learn pretty much anything you can think of by using lynda.com. And you would visit our Tech2Go desk over there to inquire about that. We also have computers, the computers that are found here in our creative studios, and ones that you can check out from the Tech2Go desk. They have Adobe InDesign on it, so you can also practice with it if you'd like. That was just a little plug. Okay, a couple more things we'll do. Let's go ahead, let's click on our image here. And we have the selection tool highlighted. I clicked on it. And we know it's highlighted because it has these boxes around it. On the right side, on your workspace, you have something called an effects panel. And with the effects panel, right now it's showing me the effects that are on it. The fill is normal, its stroke is normal, there's nothing really done to it yet. But if you click on that effects panel, down here on the right, there's actually a drop-down menu, and we want to click on that. And you see a bunch of different effects that you can add to it. Right now we're just going to do the drop shadow, but I encourage you to investigate them further later on. So click on drop shadow, comes up with a bunch of options. I'm going to move this out of the way because I want to be able to see what I'm doing here. So I'll try to move it over. And I'm going to click this preview box so I can see what I'm doing while I do it. You notice that it comes up, let me move this over, it comes up with a shadow, and it kind of looks like the light is coming in from this angle. The opacity here, that just tells you how dark do you want the shadow. I think this is too dark for me, so I'm personally going to make it lower. You can click that arrow and it comes up with a little drop-down box, and you can slide it back and forth. I made mine 37. You can make yours darker, lighter, however you want to play with it. A fun thing that I like to play with here too is you can change the angle of it, so where it looks like the sun or the light is coming at it. You can like spin that around and you can see how it's moving down there. I'm going to keep mine at 135. I like that angle. There's a bunch of different things. You can also change it manually using the X and Y coordinates here. That's all we're going to play with for right now for that. So I'm going to click OK. And now my picture has a little bit more to it. It looks like it's coming off the page a little bit. Give it more of a 2D effect instead of just being flat on the page. And we have now added our drop shadow. One last thing that I'll mention to you, one of the tools that you can use, let's say you brought in a bunch of items and you want to line them up on the page, but you're not sure if they're going to line up evenly, or you want to align them in a line, but what if you're wrong? What if you aren't looking at your ruler precisely? There's an option, there are options to align and distribute objects on your page. Now, I would go ahead and select everything here, but if I select it, don't do this just yet. If I select everything, it's going to select my background as well. And I don't really need my background to be aligned because it's my background. So I'm going to go to my layers, and there's an option here to actually hide different items. If you click that eye, it's now hidden my background. The background's still there, it's just kind of hiding off-site and I can't see it. So now that I have that, you'll notice if you go ahead and use your selection tool to highlight everything you have here, you could also, if you wanted to, you could also click these blue boxes. These little blue boxes tell me that my layers are all highlighted, except for my background, which is hidden. And once you've done that, now that you have items selected, there are some tools at the top right here for alignment. If you hover over these ones on the right, there's align left edges. So if I click that, all of a sudden now everything is to the left. I don't want to do that because I already have my grid. It's all pretty and perfect. Let's say I wanted to make everything centered. You could align center. There's also, if you go here to this drop down, you can align it to, you can choose what you want to align it to. Do you want to align it to the page? Do you want it to align it to the margins? You can even select a key object. So now that one with the bright blue box around it, that's my key object, meaning that I want everything to align according to that object. So if I were to click left now, it'd all be left and whatnot. But I like how I had it, so I'm going to leave it. You can also do the same thing over here. I don't see it on mine, but it also comes up with distribution options. It would be right to the right here. I'm not sure why it's not on mine, but it would say to distribute the objects. Let's say you wanted to distribute them vertically, evenly across the page. You can use that option. So, like I said, there is a lot of powerful things that you can do with InDesign. This is a very basic introduction to working with text and graphics and font, and some neat things that you can do with your graphics and fonts. I mentioned you can get your lynda.com login. Adobe.com also has some excellent resources, some tutorials that you can watch on there. There's a lot to be learned actually just from Adobe.com by itself about these programs. So, are there any questions that I can answer?
Well, we do have one question from Twitter.
Yes. Excellent.
So our question is, when should I use InDesign over Photoshop?
Ooh, that is an excellent question. Would you
wanna
like to
take that
field
one?
that, Bonnie?
Sure.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so Adobe has a really powerful suite of software. They call it the Adobe Creative Cloud. And so lots of you have probably heard of Photoshop. Photoshop is part of the Adobe Creative Cloud. InDesign that we learned today is part of the Adobe Creative Cloud. And each of these softwares are designed to do something different. So the piece that we use today, InDesign, is designed for page layout. It's really great. I kind of think of it as anytime I have lots of text that I want to work with, InDesign is great. Of all of the Adobe tools, InDesign handles bodies of text very well. So if you're laying out a book or a resume or a poster that's going to have a lot of text on it, InDesign's where you want to start. Photoshop is ideal for editing photos. Hence the name Photoshop. So anything that you're doing, if you're doing photo collages, if you're making some adjustments, cleaning up your photos, maybe changing some of the colors, doing some color correction in your photos, I would go to Photoshop to start with that kind of thing. The great thing about the Adobe softwares, though, is that they all work together really, really well. So if you want to do a little bit of photo editing in Photoshop and then pull that photo into your InDesign piece, the programs make it really easy to do that. So we did that today. Christina had a Photoshop document. That was the image that we used, that we pulled in. And one of the things you can do too is from here, if you decide after you have your photo there in the document that maybe you want to do a little more editing, really that editing should be done in Photoshop, they make it really easy to edit it directly. You can jump from one to the other really well. So, Christine, if you want to just click on links.
Sure.
So, in your links now, we see beach_picture.psd because we've linked, when we placed it, we linked it to that original file. if you can just, I think you left click on that, and it will give you the option, maybe it's one of these.
Oh.
From here, edit original. So if I click on that little pencil there, while I have that selected, it's going to pop open Photoshop for me and automatically open that file, and it's going to link those two documents. So it works with if you've done some original illustration in Adobe Illustrator, hence the name. It works the same way. You can pull that illustration into your InDesign document. If you want to make some tweaks, you can just go to that links panel and launch it from there.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Any other questions? No? Well, Christine and I are both going to be hanging out here for a little while afterwards, so if you have some questions you want to ask us, you will certainly be here. I'm going to hand it over to Amanda. She is going to wrap it up, and we're going to draw for some prizes.
Hi, thank you all for coming. As Christina said, if you had any other questions about InDesign or page layout, you can ask one of the staff in the creative studios, or you can get one of those logins for lynda.com. So those are some great options to help you learn or train even on other things than InDesign. So our next Tech Tuesday at 2 will be on March 1st, and we're going to be presenting Skype's The Limit. Basically, participants are going to learn how to look and sound their best on Skype if you're going to do it for an interview or anything like that. So as always, we'll be giving away some great tech prizes at every single Tech Tuesday this semester. And we just want to say thank you so much to OkState TV for live streaming this for us. And we're going to go ahead and say goodbye to everyone online. And then we're going to give away some prizes. So thank you. We ready?